Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have...
My name's Scott Chatterton. I'm the director for BIM Solutions for a company called BIM One, and I'm also on the member of the board of directors for CAMBIM.
Okay, and given that we're talking about wood design and BIM, and you have sort of a unique insight to that, you also have a report we're going to talk about a little later. So maybe you could go into how BIM and wood can interact, because it's not those two, maybe they should go together, but it's not something that springs to mind right off the top of your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good point. And what we've seen over the last number of years, right? BIM has always been an integral part of the design process for the construction industry. What we're seeing now is with the rise of prefabrication, off-site fabrication, and the use of heavy timber or mass timber in architecture and in construction, we're starting to see more of a utilization of BIM as part of the fabrication process. So a lot of to do with the way that they fabricate the mass timber components using CNC machines and digital tools around their fabrication process. We're actually linking the two together now. So utilizing the BIM as part of the design process and then integrating the fabrication process into it. So, there's a lot of discussion around direct to build, where we're actually taking the model and the design and then giving that to the fabricators and then either integrating a fabrication model into the design model or just doing the design in a way that the fabricators can utilize it straight off the bat. So we're certainly seeing a lot more utilization of BIM around integrated with the wood industry. So it's really interesting time.
And so maybe report's not the right word, guide, because it's called the Building Information Modeling for Wood Buildings, an introductory guide. So introductory would presume that there is still some learning to be done out there. So is that something you've run into as you've worked on this guide?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in the industry for many years, and especially involved with the promotion of BIM within the AECO industry. And even today, we're still working with people that are learning about BIM, wanting to integrate digital tools and digital practice within their practice, whether that's design, architectural design, engineering, construction, fabrication, suppliers, trades. So we still see a great deal of that mix. And the guide that we have, the BIM for wood building design, is kind of an introductory stepping stone for all members of the AECO industry to be able to understand and learn more about how BIM can be utilized for wood buildings, all the way from the owners to the designers and the contractors.
And I would imagine as wood building becomes more complex, I mean, there's at UBC, there's this literal skyscraper that's made of wood. So BIM would sort of lend itself to those bigger projects. Whereas before, if you had a showcase, but it's like a community center or something, I guess BIM could still be used there, but it wouldn't be as complex a project, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and well, BIM is it's utilized across all spectrums of projects from multi-story high-rise to community centers, smaller buildings, all the way down through to residential. So it's certainly being utilized.
And I know with traditional quote unquote BIM projects, a lot of it is used for clash detection, sort of going through a project before it's finished or doing digital twins. And I would assume wood design lends itself to that as well, even especially since it's modular a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. The traditional, the modern traditional process of delivering projects through the design phase is basically using building information modeling to portray and communicate the design intent. So, and that includes doing, coordination, clash detection, analysis of the building, so the building performance, analysis of the mechanical, electrical system, doing structural analysis, that type of thing. But there's still, even then, the end result is typically a PDF or a 2D printed set of documents that the constructor then uses. What the BIM guide helps us do is communicate the differences between that and fully utilizing BIM as part of the design process, but also as part in linking in and communicating the design and fabrication process as part of that, and then ultimately construction on site. And as you mentioned earlier, we've talked about prefabrication and offsite construction. Now we're also talking a lot about modularization. So creating panelization panels, and then the design, I don't say design constraints, maybe the design requirements to provide the data and information to the fabricators around, modular construction or panelized or prefabricated elements that then plug together, snap together during the construction process.
And I know both wood construction and BIM are used to improve or like guarantee sustainability. And so how can you work BIM into that with wood, since you're kind of got a leg up with wood in the first place because it's way more carbon friendly. But I'm sure there's ways to sort of integrate the two to make it even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, with the carbon capture of wood, really that's the greatest benefit. And we're seeing more and more buildings where wood is certainly featured heavily in the design, not only in the aesthetic design of the building, but also the practical applications of using it as a structural member, and then also to facilitate rapid building of the project. So in cases where, we've got a very tight site, we've got limitations on time or road access or landing of materials, being able to create these mass timber floors or walls or roof panels off-site, bring them in and quickly enclose the building just has huge benefit, right? To minimizing the construction timeline, minimizing the disruption on site and to the public and the community as a whole. Not to mention the environmental benefits of using a carbon capture mass timber, but also the mitigation of waste, right? Being able to fabricate these elements in a controlled environment, we were able to create a safer environment for the staff that is building these elements, and also reduce the amount of waste that occurs on site, and then rapidly put this building together so the trades can come in and then do the fit out. It's the benefits are huge.
And you just mentioned aesthetics. I was just wondering about, because when computer design became more of a factor of construction generally, you saw a lot of out there is not the right word, but a lot of way different designs than you were used to before, and wood really lends itself to that. So does BIM sort of kind of hypercharge that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that probably in the last 10 years with their unique designs that probably would not have been capable unless we were using a building information modeling platform. There's some spectacular architecture out there that previously, they would have been few and far between and very much signature pieces. Now what we're seeing is more creativity and more unique designs that are driven by not only the aesthetics of the project and the abilities of the architect, but also the sustainable needs. So, we're seeing more projects out there with green roofs, with using sustainable materials, and with much more aesthetic designs that are more compatible to the communities. So they're not as harsh and they're more integrated into the built environment.
And one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, but is a vital part of sustainability too, is deconstruction. If you're demolishing a building and it's made of cement, there's going to be carbon released, and not so much with wood. What about BIM and deconstruction and disassembly? I would assume that lends itself to this process as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And many years ago, I was involved with the timber frame and log industry, and we had a guy on staff that would actually go out into rural North America and look for these old projects. So using recycled barn material, even recycling old log and timber frame buildings, and that was buildings that were done 50, 60, 70, sometimes 100 years ago. And we're repurposing that material. Now, a lot of the projects that we see now are modern and utilized now. I think in the future, when we look at decommissioning these buildings, we'll either look at, actually, I'll take a step back there. I think what we will see first is an extension in the lifespan of these buildings, because I think the use of mass timber and heavy timbers in these projects lends themselves to repurposing these buildings a lot easier than what we've traditionally seen, as opposed to using concrete or even wood stick frame or metal stick frame. I think what we'll see now is either the repurposing and reconfiguring of these buildings to meet the immediate needs. And then when it finally does come to the point of decommissioning and deconstructing these buildings, I think what we'll see is the repurposing of a lot of the materials will be a lot easier. It's a lot easier to repurpose timbers than it would be for, let's say, traditional stick frame, wood studs, even wood beams, that kind of thing. So I think it's certainly going to lend itself to that, for that usage in the future. But what I'm excited about is, we're starting in North America to talk about repurposing buildings more now, as opposed to, decommissioning, knocking them down and rebuilding something else, which is something that we see certainly a lot more in Europe than we do here.
Do you think that's partly just COVID forcing our hand because we've got all these empty buildings that we probably should be doing something with, and this makes people think about it generally and kind of sort of project outward as to what we could do?
I think there's a number of factors. I think the first one is sustainability. The cost of decommissioning and the waste involved with deconstructing a building, as opposed to maybe putting a little bit more effort into it and thinking about how we can repurpose these buildings. And as you said, there's an awful, COVID has certainly had a great impact on the population of our office buildings in our major centers, and then converting those to either more flexible spaces or even residential is certainly becoming more appealing.
Okay, and finally, I guess I would ask, what do you think blue sky is the future for BIM and wood in concert?
I think we're going to see more direct to fabrication, not only in wood, but I think in construction aspects across the board. We don't even think about, when we're putting in a door or a window, that was prefabricated. It was prefabricated off-site and then integrated into the design and then installed on site. So I think we're going to see more and more of that become more common. Off-site fabrication, modularization that lends itself to flexibility in the design. And as we just talked about in the repurposing of these buildings, being able to plug and play different aspects to meet the needs of the community for that specific purpose of the building, I think that's the blue sky part of it, which is pretty exciting stuff.
Okay, Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you, Warren.